My parents always called me too sensitive, but I learned to use it to my advantage by harnessing my emotions and becoming the strongest person in the family, gaining the respect I always deserved. Hey, Hajichi, I never thought I'd be sharing this, but here we are. I, 28F, grew up being the sensitive one in my family, and honestly, it used to really bug me. My parents, especially my dad, always said I was too emotional and needed to toughen up. That sensitive label stuck with me for a long time, even into adulthood, and it got to a point where I started believing it myself. But now, I've learned how to use it to my advantage, and let me tell you, it's changed everything. This is the story of how I went from the too sensitive kid to the person who finally stood up for herself, and how my family's attitude toward me completely flipped. To give some context, I grew up in a family where my brother, Daniel, 30M, was the golden child. He could do no wrong. Whatever he did, my parents praised him endlessly. He played football, had tons of friends, and got great grades. Meanwhile, I was more into reading, art, and being a little quieter, I guess. Not exactly the typical tough personality they seem to admire. I remember my dad constantly telling me to stop being so soft or stop crying over everything. I never felt like I could do anything right, even though I was trying my best. My mom would always say, Daniel is strong because he pushes through things. Why can't you be like that? I didn't get it. I wasn't weak. I just had different strengths. But that never seemed to matter to them. As I got older, I started becoming more independent. I went off to college, got my degree, and then started working in a creative field, something my parents never understood. All they cared about was whether I was making enough money or if I was settling by and not pursuing something that made me rich. They never understood my career, my choices, or my feelings. I thought things would get better once I moved out, but, well, things just shifted to new kinds of drama. For example, when Daniel got married, my parents threw a huge wedding celebration. It was extravagant, like something out of a movie. I was happy for him, of course, but there was always this undercurrent of look at Daniel. He's so successful and amazing. They barely acknowledged that I had just launched my own business around the same time. They didn't even ask how it was going. When I finally mentioned it, my dad just shrugged it off and said, well, that's cute, but I hope you're not expecting it to make you rich. It didn't stop there. Over the years, I watched as my parents handed Daniel endless support, financially, emotionally, whatever he needed. When he struggled, they bent over backward to help him out. But when I had problems, I was just told to figure it out. At one point, I had a financial setback and asked them for a small loan to tide me over. The look on my dad's face was one I'll never forget. He looked disgusted. You should have planned better, he said, brushing me off. Meanwhile, Daniel got a new car from them after he mentioned that his old one was getting kind of old. It was little things like this that built up over time, and I began to feel like I didn't belong in my own family. Things really started to escalate when I hit my breaking point. My brother and I had always had a bit of tension, mostly because of my parents' favoritism, but it was manageable until the business deal. To set the stage, I had just signed a major contract with a client I'd been working with for months. It was a big deal for my career, one that would take me to a new level of success. It meant a lot to me. I was excited to tell my parents about it. So, I went to dinner one evening, hoping for some acknowledgement. Maybe a little praise, or even just a, hey, that's great. We're proud of you. But when I brought it up, their reaction wasn't what I expected. My dad didn't even look up from his plate. My mom asked how much money I'd made from the deal, and when I told her, she raised an eyebrow and said, that's it? I thought you were going to make more than that. But it wasn't until Daniel spoke up that things really took a turn. He grinned and said, well, I guess that's nice for you, sis. But have you considered what real success looks like? And then, in front of the whole table, he casually mentioned that he had just secured an investment from some wealthy friends for a new business venture. The smugness on his face was unbearable. I was speechless, but it didn't end there. Oh no. Over the next few weeks, things started to get really out of hand. My parents, who barely acknowledged my achievements, started lavishing praise on Daniel for every little thing he did. Oh, Daniel is really doing well with that investment. We're so proud of him. My mom even asked me, in a tone that reeked of disappointment, when are you going to get yourself into something big like Daniel? Something that actually makes a difference. This constant comparison was draining, and it felt like I was suffocating. But there was a moment when something inside me shifted. It wasn't the first time my parents had dismissed me or belittled my success, but it was the moment I decided I was done being the too sensitive one, the one who let everything slide. I was going to stand up for myself. I began working on something in secret. I didn't tell anyone, not even Victor, my boyfriend. I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of knowing what I was about to do. Slowly, I built my empire. Every move I made was calculated. Every decision was strategic. I wasn't just going to prove my parents wrong. I was going to make them realize how much they had underestimated me. But they weren't done yet. One day, out of nowhere, my dad called me and asked if I could come over for a serious conversation. Naturally, I assumed it was about something else entirely. But as I walked into their house that day, I had no idea just how far my family would go to tear me down. I walked into my parents' house that day with no clue what was coming. It was a Sunday, and the whole house was unusually quiet. When I arrived, my dad was sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom was in the living room, watching TV. They weren't acting like anything was wrong, but there was this weird tension in the air. I sat down across from my dad, who gave me a look that I couldn't quite place. It was different from the usual indifference, like he was trying to read me or maybe size me up in some way. "So what's this about?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light, but my stomach was already starting to twist. My dad didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at me for a moment before saying, "Your mom and I have been talking." I raised an eyebrow. "Talking about what?" "We've been thinking about how much help Daniel's been to us. He's really come through for us lately, especially with his new venture. He's been so proactive, so responsible, and we think it's time for you to follow his example." I felt my blood pressure spike. It was like being hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. "Follow his example?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. "Yeah," he said, not even noticing how the words were landing. "You've always been a little too sensitive, haven't you? Maybe it's time you stop feeling so much and focused on something real, something that will really get you ahead." I blinked, struggling to process what I was hearing. My dad was still calling me too sensitive? After everything I'd been through, everything I'd accomplished, this was how he was framing it? Like I was some fragile little girl who couldn't handle the world? It took every ounce of strength I had to not lash out right then and there. But I didn't. I held it in. I took a deep breath and tried to find the right words. "Are you saying I haven't been working hard? That everything I've built doesn't matter?" My voice was quieter now, but the sting of the question was real. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just shrugged and looked away like it didn't really matter. "You've been doing fine, I guess. But it's not enough, you know? You could do more. You could be like Daniel, who's really doing something with his life. His business, his future, it's all lined up." I felt like I was going to explode. My parents had always been this way, dismissive of me, comparing me to Daniel. It had been happening for years, but something in me snapped. I was so tired of being ignored, of being told I wasn't good enough. Before I could respond, my mom wandered into the kitchen and joined the conversation. Her face was unreadable, but I could tell she'd been listening from the other room. "You should take this seriously, honey," she said, her tone cold. "We've given you enough time to figure things out. But at some point, you need to make decisions that actually benefit your future. You've had your fun with your little projects, but when are you going to start thinking long-term like Daniel?" I could feel the tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not when I was so close to something bigger. This wasn't about me being weak. This wasn't about their judgment anymore. This was about me proving them wrong in a way they'd never expect. Fine, I said, standing up slowly. My voice was steady, but inside I felt a storm raging. If you want me to be more like Daniel, maybe I should start thinking bigger. But not in the way you think. I didn't give them a chance to respond. I turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I've been pushed to my limit, but I wasn't done yet. I still had my plans in motion. I'd worked hard to get to this point, and I knew I had what it took to make them see that I was far more than they ever gave me credit for. But I wasn't going to do it quietly. I wasn't going to let them off easy. The next few weeks were a blur. I kept working in silence, focusing on what I'd been building in secret. Every move I made was carefully calculated. The business deals I signed, the contacts I made, everything was part of the plan. And then, one morning, I got the phone call that changed everything. I had been offered an investment from a major player in my industry. It was a game changer, something that would take my business to an entirely new level. It was everything I'd been working for, and it came at the perfect moment. But I didn't just want to take the offer. No, I want to make my parents see that their dismissiveness had cost them the respect they thought they'd had over me, and cost them the opportunity to be a part of my success. The investment offer was a huge turning point for me. The money, the backing, the potential, it was everything I've been working toward. But it wasn't just about business anymore. It was about proving that I wasn't the too sensitive one, that I wasn't the afterthought in my own family. A week after I received the investment offer, I called my parents. I knew it was time for the big reveal. My heart was pounding in my chest as I dialed their number. When my dad picked up, I could barely keep the calm tone in my voice. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to sound casual. "I need to talk to you and Mom about something. Can we meet tomorrow?" His response was lukewarm. "Sure, but make it quick. We've got plans tomorrow night." "I'll make it worth your time," I said, hanging up before I could second-guess myself. The next day, I walked into their house with Victor by my side, and I knew exactly how I wanted to do this. I wasn't going to let them keep pushing me around. They needed to see who I had become, who I had always been under all that criticism. This was my moment. We sat down at the same kitchen table where I had spent so many years feeling small. My parents were already seated, with that same skeptical look on their faces. Daniel, of course, wasn't there. He never was when it came to family meetings like this, especially when it was about me. I looked them both in the eye, taking a deep breath. "I've been given a chance to take my business to the next level," I said, letting the words hang in the air. My dad raised an eyebrow, looking disinterested at first. "Yeah? How much money are we talking about? If it's not worth anything, don't waste our time." "I've just signed a major deal," I said. "And it's not just a deal, it's an investment. A serious investment. I'm getting a funding boost from one of the top investors in the industry." Their faces changed in an instant. My dad sat up straighter, and my mom's eyes widened. For the first time in forever, I had their full attention. "Wait, what?" My dad blinked, his voice suddenly sounding different. "Are you serious? How much money are we talking about?" I smiled a little, though it was mostly for me at this point. "Enough to take my business into a whole new direction. Enough to put me in a position where I'll be making more than any of you ever thought possible." Victor squeezed my hand under the table, and I could feel the tension in the air. My mom's expression shifted between disbelief and something else, regret, maybe. For once, I didn't care what they thought. "Look," I said, leaning in slightly, "you've always compared me to Daniel. You've always treated me like I wasn't good enough. But I'm done with that. I'm done being the too sensitive one you can dismiss. I've worked harder than anyone in this family to get to this point, and it's not just about money. It's about respect. You don't get to decide how far I go anymore." There was silence for a long moment, and then my dad finally spoke. "You don't have to be so dramatic about it," he muttered, but I could tell it was a weak response. He didn't know how to handle it. "I'm not being dramatic," I said firmly. "I'm just showing you the reality. You never gave me the chance, but now you're going to have to accept that I've outgrown all the comparisons, all the belittling, and all the expectations. I'm not your backup plan. I'm my own person." For a second, my mom didn't know how to react. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but then closed it again. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My dad just looked at me, his face unreadable. I stood up, looking at them both one last time. "I'm not asking for your approval anymore," I said softly. "But if you ever want to be part of my success, you know where to find me." Victor and I walked out of the house, leaving my parents stunned in the kitchen. I felt this strange weight lift off my shoulders, like I had finally stepped out of their shadow, out of their expectations. As we drove home, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning for me, but more importantly, it was the end of the old version of me, the one who let everyone walk all over her. I had finally proven that the things they called weaknesses, the things they used to dismiss, were actually the things that made me strong. It's been about a month since that conversation with my parents, and the situation hasn't played out quite the way I expected. My parents haven't really reached out to me much. I mean, they've texted a few times, asking how things are going with my business, but it's always been a little surface level. They haven't apologized, and they haven't acknowledged the way they treated me. I think they're still processing the fact that I'm not the same person they've always been able to dismiss. My dad's still acting like nothing's changed, and my mom? She's been distant, almost like she doesn't know how to approach me anymore. The real kicker, though, is Daniel. Once he got wind of my business deal, he started acting like he'd been my biggest supporter all along. He called me a few days after that family meeting, saying how proud he was of me and how I should have shared my success with him earlier. At first, I didn't know how to react, but then I realized he was just trying to insert himself into my success now that he saw I wasn't the little sister he could easily brush aside. I didn't buy it. I told him I appreciated the sentiment, but it was too little, too late. I wasn't about to let him waltz in and take credit for my hard work just because now I was the one with the bigger success. Victor and I have been doing great, though. He's been nothing but supportive, and honestly, that's all I need. I found my own strength, my own sense of purpose, and while I'm sure my family's pride or approval would still be nice deep down, I don't feel like I need it anymore. I'm currently expanding my business, looking into new ventures, and really starting to build my future in a way that feels true to me. And as for my family, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen with them. I still haven't had a heart-to-heart with them where they truly understand how they made me feel, and maybe I'm okay with that. I'm no longer trying to force them to acknowledge my worth. If they choose to be part of my life moving forward, they'll have to accept me as I am, and if they can't, that's on them. Was I the one being too harsh? I don't think I was wrong for standing up for myself, but sometimes I wonder if maybe I should have approached it differently. I'm not looking for an apology anymore, but I do wonder if I could have made things less confrontational. My parents have always been difficult to get through to, and I was at my breaking point when I finally called them out. Anyway, what do you think? Was I the a-hole for doing things the way I did? Or was it justified? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the story and want to hear more stories like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to drop a comment below. Let us know what you think. Was this person justified in their actions, or did they go too far? We want to hear your thoughts. And if you've ever had a similar family situation, share your story with us.